I found out I was blocked when my own son stopped answering my calls. At first, I thought he was busy. Then I tried texting, nothing. It was my granddaughter who told me, casually, "Mom said it's better for everyone's peace if Grandpa can't call all the time." Peace? I raised that boy, paid off the mortgage on the house they live in, my house. I buried my wife in that garden. And now, I was too inconvenient to speak to. So I changed the locks. If they could shut me out of their phones, I could shut them out of my home. I wasn't always the man standing behind a locked door, wondering what went wrong. No, once, I was Dad. Once, I was everything to that boy. My wife Marjorie and I didn't have much starting out. I worked maintenance at the local mill, and she worked part-time at the library until James was born. We bought this house with a small down payment and a whole lot of sweat. I remember laying floorboards with her handing me nails in her gardening gloves, smiling like it was a castle. We didn't have a lot, but what we had, we built together. James was our only child. He came after 2 miscarriages and a lot of praying. I still remember holding him the first time, red-faced, squirming, lungs working just fine. I looked at him and thought, that's it. That's the whole point of me now. Every extra shift I worked, every night Marjorie stayed up rocking him through fevers, we never once complained. That was love. That was family. I taught him how to ride a bike on the very street he later told me not to drive on because his wife didn't like unannounced visits. Back then, he'd scrape his knee and come running into my arms. Marjorie would clean him up while I promised ice cream if he was brave. We were a good team, the 3 of us. School days came and went. He was a smart kid, sharp, polite, always eager to please. When he got into college, Marjorie cried for a week straight. I drove him down in our old truck, every box labeled with her handwriting. We gave him the master bedroom when he came home for breaks, told him this would always be his place to land. Then came the wedding. James brought her home, Emma, during his senior year. She was all polish and city talk, but Marjorie took to her quickly. I tried, too. She was polite at first. Always thanked us for meals, laughed at my bad jokes. But she didn't understand our kind of family, the kind that didn't need to knock before coming in, the kind that shared everything. Still, I paid for part of the wedding. Marjorie wanted a big one, said we only had 1 child, so we'd go all out. I handed James a check and told him, "It's your day. Just promise me you'll take care of each other." He nodded. I believed him. When their first baby came, I was there every day. Diapers, night feeds, pacing the living room at 2 a.m. while Emma recovered. I told James he could sleep, I had it. "You already raised one," he said, smiling. "You're a pro." I felt useful. I felt needed. That's all I ever wanted, to help them build what Marjorie and I had. After Marjorie passed, well, that's when the lines started blurring. She had cancer, quick and cruel. 6 months from diagnosis to goodbye. The house felt empty without her. James and Emma invited me to move upstairs into the spare room. Said it was easier than worrying. I was grateful. Being near the grandkids helped with the grief. I cooked dinners, fixed leaky faucets, helped Emma when James had late shifts. One night, I caught Emma crying quietly in the laundry room. Her hands were red from bleach, and she looked so small. I didn't say anything, just left a cup of tea on the counter and fixed the door hinge that had been squeaking for weeks. She never said thank you for those small things. But I didn't need her to. Back then, I still believed we were all doing our best. When they decided to buy the house next door, a fixer-upper, they came to me. James said, "Dad, if you help us with the down payment, we can stay close. The kids can run between yards. You'll never be alone." Of course I helped. We refinanced this house, still in my name, and I handed them a check big enough to cover half of theirs. Emma said it made more sense for all assets to be centralized so they could handle payments efficiently. I trusted them. Why wouldn't I? They never moved next door. 2 months later, they decided to renovate and said it would be best for everyone if we all lived in one house to save money. I let them move in with the promise it would be temporary. That was 3 years ago. I never charged them rent. Never asked for anything back. I just wanted to be around my family. I thought, this is what Marjorie would have wanted. In those early days, before the coldness set in, we were still a family. Family dinners with mismatched plates, kids giggling, stories shared. James and I would sometimes sit on the back porch with a beer, watching the sunset like we used to. I held on to those moments like driftwood in a storm, hoping they'd carry me forward. But time does strange things to people. And slowly, I began to notice the small cracks that would eventually split wide open. It didn't happen all at once. That's the cruel part. You don't wake up one day to betrayal, it trickles in like a slow leak, quiet enough to ignore until your feet are soaked and the damage is done. The first time I really noticed it, I was making my famous Sunday stew. James had always loved it, said it reminded him of coming home after Little League. I spent the morning dicing, stirring, simmering, just like Marjorie used to. When I called everyone to eat, Emma walked in, wrinkled her nose, and said, "We're doing meal prep now. We're avoiding heavy stuff." No thank you, no smile. Just walked past the pot like it was a pile of garbage. James gave me a weak shrug, sat down out of guilt, picked at the bowl, and left half of it untouched. I washed the dishes alone that night. The kids didn't even come to the table. From then on, little things piled up. They started keeping their own fridge in the garage, just for convenience, Emma said. They rearranged the living room without asking. Moved my chair to the corner. When I asked if we could put it back, she said, "We're trying to create a cleaner aesthetic." Cleaner. I suppose I didn't fit the look anymore. James stopped watching the ball game with me. We used to sit for hours, even if we weren't talking much, we shared the silence. But now he'd say, "Emma wants to watch her show tonight," and disappear into their room with the door closed. Every night. I still had the grandkids, for a while. They'd wander into my room after school, show me their drawings, ask for stories about when Dad was little. I lived for those moments. But then Emma started saying things like, "Let's not confuse them with too many opinions," or, "They're getting older, they don't need so much grandparent time." What opinions? I told them bedtime stories and how to ride bikes. I wasn't teaching rebellion. And James, he just nodded along. I used to look at him and see a little boy with skin knees and wide eyes. Now I looked at him and saw a man who wouldn't meet mine. I remember one morning I asked him if he wanted to go fishing, just the two of us, like old times. He hesitated, then said, "Emma's family is visiting that weekend. Maybe another time." That another time never came. Then came the passive-aggressive jabs. Emma would say things like, "You know, some people your age live independently," or, "You've had a good run in this house, haven't you?" James would smile politely, say nothing. Sometimes he'd even chuckle. I started staying downstairs more. I didn't want to be in the way. I fixed up the basement to feel like a little apartment, bought a hot plate, kept a mini fridge. I told myself it was to give them space. In truth, I was exiling myself. At night, I'd lie in bed and hear them laughing upstairs. My laughter used to echo through those same halls. They began locking the upstairs door. Said it was for security, in case the kids wandered. But I knew. I knew what that lock meant. One afternoon, I walked in on them whispering in the office. The second they saw me, they went silent. Papers on the desk, quickly shuffled. Emma gave me a tight smile and said, we're just organizing bills. Nothing important. James didn't say a word. Later that evening, I checked the shredder bin. Bank statements. Refinance documents. My name scratched out on a sticky note. My chest tightened. I told myself I was imagining things. That they'd never try to take the house. I mean, it's still under my name. I helped them. Why would they? But doubt is like rot. Once it sets in, everything feels suspect. One day, my phone rang, an unknown number. It was the pharmacy. Apparently James and Emma had requested that my prescriptions be sent to a different address, for convenience. I told them no, that wasn't necessary. The woman on the phone hesitated. They said they had power of attorney. Power of attorney? That night, I asked James about it. He looked startled, then annoyed. Dad, it's just a backup thing. In case something happens. You're getting older. In case what happens? I asked. My voice was calm, but something in me was shaking. Emma stepped in. We're trying to make sure everyone's protected. Don't you want what's best for the family? I looked at her. Her eyes didn't blink. Her smile was tight. I'd seen that same expression on people negotiating at pawn shops. Polite, predatory. I said nothing. Just nodded. Went back downstairs. That was the night I dug out Marjorie's old folder from the filing cabinet, the one labeled legal. Inside were copies of the deed, the original mortgage documents, the will she'd helped me draft years ago. I stayed up reading, my old hands tracing the ink like braille. I wasn't imagining things. I was being erased. It was a Saturday. James and Emma were hosting some sort of brunch for her friends, the kind where everyone wore matching beige sweaters and talked about yoga retreats. I wasn't invited, but I was in the house, so I stayed out of sight, mostly downstairs. Until I heard the back door slam. One of the kids, my youngest grandson, came running down the stairs, crying. I met him halfway and knelt down. What happened, bud? He hiccuped through tears. Mom said I couldn't come in your room anymore. His cheeks were wet. She said it's not my house. But I thought it was yours, Grandpa. I held him tightly, biting the inside of my cheek to stay calm. Go upstairs, I said gently. Everything's all right. He wiped his nose on his sleeve and ran back up. That line echoed in my head. It's not his house. It didn't sound like a slip. It sounded like a truth they'd been telling themselves for a while. Later, I went upstairs to grab a book I'd left in the den. The party was still in full swing. I walked through quietly, trying not to disturb anything, until I heard Emma's voice, clear and loud, laughing. She was telling a story about someone else's father who refused to move into assisted living. Oh, my God, she said between giggles, it's like they think they own the place just because they've been there forever. I keep telling James, you don't want to be 40 still dealing with daddy's slippers in the hallway. The laughter that followed wasn't cruel, but it was cutting. And James? He was standing right beside her, drink in hand. He didn't laugh, but he didn't say a word either. Just sipped and looked away. I froze in the hallway. Someone noticed me. One of Emma's friends, eyes wide, nudged her. Emma turned, eyes landing on me, not with guilt, but annoyance. Oh. We didn't know you were upstairs. Thought you were out. I wanted to ask, out of the house? Out of the way? Out of their lives? Instead, I just said, left a book. There was an awkward silence. Someone cleared their throat. A glass clinked. I turned and walked back downstairs, the laughter resuming behind me like a door slamming shut. That night, James came down. I expected an apology, or at least an awkward explanation. But all he said was, "Emma's trying her best, Dad. Maybe give her some space." "Space," I repeated. "In my house?" His jaw clenched. "This again?" I stared at him. This boy, no, this man, who I'd carried on my shoulders, who I'd taught to swim, who I'd bailed out of credit card debt more than once. He looked at me like I was an obligation. "I've never asked for rent," I said. "I've never even asked for thanks. But I do ask for respect." And that wasn't respect. He didn't deny it. He didn't defend her. He just looked tired. "Things change, Dad. Maybe you haven't noticed." "No, son. I noticed. I noticed every day." After he left, I sat in the basement for a long time. The silence didn't comfort me anymore. It suffocated. The next morning, I made coffee, just for myself. I used to make a pot for everyone, used to lay out mugs. Not anymore. I went out to the garden. Marjorie's garden. Even with the creeping weeds and Emma's tacky lawn decor, I could still feel her there. I sat by her rosebush, the one we planted the year James was born, and stared at the small stone we placed there after she passed, a quiet tribute. "Always home," it read. What would she think now? I remembered her voice. "Don't let anyone make you feel small in your own home, Harold." She'd said that once when the neighbor accused me of trimming the hedge too far over. I laughed then. It didn't feel funny now. By afternoon, I noticed my keys were missing. The ones I always left on the kitchen hook. Gone. I asked James. He said, "Emma thought it might be better if we had one set. You don't go out much." That was it. That was the moment. The moment it wasn't just tension, or misunderstanding, it was control. "You're locking me in my own house now?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's not like that, Dad." "Then what is it like?" He didn't answer. I walked to the hardware store the next day. Bought a new set of locks, not for the front door, but for the basement suite. I needed one space that was mine. Emma called it paranoid when she noticed. James said nothing. A few days later, I heard them whispering again, this time behind a closed door. Something about a lawyer. Something about easing the transition. I eased it for them. I stopped cooking. I stopped watching the kids. I stopped smiling in the hallways. I became invisible, just like they seem to want. But even invisible people have eyes. And I was watching. You'd think after all that, after the comments, the rearranged house, the missing keys, I wouldn't be surprised anymore. But betrayal has a way of digging deeper when you think the worst is behind you. I was in the garage one evening, sorting through Marjorie's old gardening tools. The kids had outgrown the sandbox, and Emma had mentioned reclaiming the space. I figured I'd try to tidy it before they decided to throw everything out behind my back. I reached for a plastic bin labeled Smaz Lights and noticed a folder tucked between it and an old vacuum. It wasn't dusty like the rest. Inside, printed emails, mortgage documents, and a typed-out plan labeled Long-Term Living Solutions, Transition Outline. It wasn't just paperwork. It was a playbook, about me. One page laid out a step-by-step timeline for phasing out dependency, which in this case meant moving me to a senior facility. Not even a nearby one. A place 2 towns over. Far enough that visits would be less emotionally disruptive. Another page listed possible reasons to justify the transition: memory lapses, conflict over property boundaries, emotional instability. Memory lapses? I do crosswords every morning. I fix their appliances. I still shovel the walkway when it snows. Emotional instability? Emma once cried because the grocery store ran out of oat milk. My hands were shaking. I closed the folder slowly, like it might explode. My heart pounded, not out of fear, but something older. A deep, ancient humiliation. To know your family sees you not as a father, but as a burden to be managed. I didn't say anything that night. Instead, I sat on the porch for hours, staring at the sky where Marjorie and I used to sip coffee together. That porch swing had carried so many good memories. Now, it felt like a waiting room. I kept the folder. And I started watching. They weren't careful. Maybe they thought I was too old or too oblivious. But once I knew what to look for, the signs were everywhere. Emma had started making comments like, "I read that change is good for seniors, especially when they've been stuck in routines too long." James parroted her tone, "You might like a place where everything's taken care of. No responsibilities. Just rest." I told him, "This house is my rest. It's also my responsibility. It's all I have left of your mother." His eyes darted away. Like my pain made him uncomfortable. I found a business card in the trash for a lawyer who specialized in elder relocation and property transfer. The kind of lawyer who helps you quietly move someone out and take control of the estate before they can protest. It all made sense. Why Emma had been so friendly in the beginning. Why James kept avoiding hard conversations. They were playing a long game, a slow, smiling exile. The next Sunday, I called their bluff. At breakfast, I placed the folder on the table, unopened. Emma froze the moment she saw it. James put down his fork. "Where did you find that?" she asked, voice sharp. "In my garage," I said. "In my house." "It's not what you think," James added quickly, but his voice was too rehearsed. "I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I gave you this roof," I said. "I gave you everything. And you're planning to put me away like an old piece of furniture?" "No one's trying to put you away," Emma said, but the way her voice shook betrayed her. I stood. "You know what the worst part is? You didn't even ask. You didn't talk to me. You just decided." James didn't say a word. Just sat there, jaw clenched, looking at the folder like it was a snake. That night, I had a dream. Marjorie was standing in the kitchen, back turned, humming like she used to. I walked up to her, reached out, but when she turned around, her face was blank. Just light. I woke up gasping. That's when I knew. I wasn't going to be erased. I started noticing who was paying attention. Our neighbor, Mrs. Elkins, knocked one morning with a tray of muffins. "Saw the for sale sign come down," she said casually. "Was worried they might be pushing you out." I didn't deny it. Just gave her a tired smile. "Still here?" She nodded. "Good. Let me know if you need anything. Some of us remember who built this place." It was the first kindness I'd felt in weeks. After that, I began listening more closely. Keeping notes. Looking through my old papers. Quietly preparing. Because if they were going to come for what was mine, they'd have to go through the man who built it. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. I didn't explode. I didn't scream. That's what they were expecting, I think, for the old man to finally snap so they could say, "See? He's not well." But I didn't give them that satisfaction. I just got quiet. Too quiet for them to read. The next morning, I made coffee like always. Sat at the kitchen table while Emma floated around the room with that false cheer she wore like perfume, sweet but suffocating. She glanced at me and said, "We've been thinking it might be nice for you to take a little trip. Just a few days away to clear your head. There's a place upstate, really lovely, with..." I cut her off, still staring into my coffee. "No." She blinked. "What?" I finally looked at her. I said no. The silence between us thickened. James walked in halfway through, carrying one of the kids' backpacks. He sensed something in the air. "What's going on?" "Your father doesn't want to consider a short retreat," Emma said, forcing a smile. "It's not a retreat," I said calmly. "It's exile." James sighed, set the backpack down. "Dad, this isn't what you think." "No?" I reached over to the drawer, pulled out the folder again. "Then help me understand it. Explain the power of attorney papers. Explain why my name is missing from the bank forms." He didn't move. Just stood there, like if he didn't respond, it wouldn't be real. I nodded. "That's what I thought." Emma's voice sharpened. "We're trying to do what's best for everyone. You're not easy to live with. You walk around like this house still belongs to you." "It does," I said. The silence after that was thick as cement. James shifted. "Look, this isn't working anymore. Maybe it's time we talked about other options." I looked at him, really looked. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "I buried your mother under that tree," I said quietly. "That tree that you now use to hang your Halloween decorations. I paid off your tuition, your car, your wedding. I held you when you broke your arm. I held you when your wife said no the first time you proposed. And this is how you repay me?" His face paled. Emma stepped in front of him like a shield. "This isn't about the past. This is about moving forward." "Then you can move forward without me," I said. She laughed, sharp, too loud. "What are you going to do, Harold? Change the locks? Throw us out?" I didn't respond. Just stood and walked away. That day, something in me settled. Not rage. Not grief. Just resolve. I visited Mr. Carson, an old friend who had retired from real estate law. He'd done some paperwork for me and Marjorie years back. I told him what was happening, not the drama, just the facts. He leaned back in his chair and said, "Harold, you've got every legal right. The house is yours. The documents they're trying to file don't hold water unless you've signed them. And you haven't." "No," I said. "And I won't." "Then you've got options." I didn't want revenge. I wanted dignity. I wanted peace. But I wasn't going to be bullied out of my own life. Carson helped me update my will. We drew up new documents. Legal notices. I had them notarized. I paid cash. Didn't tell a soul. When I got back, Emma was in the garden, pruning Marjorie's roses with dull kitchen scissors. I almost said something, but stopped myself. Let her clip the roses. She didn't know what was coming. A week later, I ran into Pete, an old neighbor, while walking to the store. He'd always been a good man, the type to shovel your sidewalk before you asked. He looked at me and said, "You doing all right, Harold?" I hesitated. "Getting by." He leaned in a little. "People talk. Heard some things. If you need a hand, I've got tools and a truck." I smiled for the first time in days. "Thank you, Pete. I'll let you know." After that, I moved in silence. I called a locksmith. Made a second copy of the new keys. Began slowly boxing up my personal things, labeling them. I didn't pack like I was leaving. I packed like I was reclaiming space. Emma started noticing the shift. She asked me one evening, "You've been quiet lately. Something going on?" I met her eyes. "Just preparing." "For what?" "For the rest of my life." She looked unsettled, but said nothing. James didn't notice at all. Too busy with his work calls, his headphones, his avoidance. But the kids noticed. One night, my granddaughter came down and asked, "Grandpa, are you okay?" I smiled and pulled her close. Better than I've been in a long time, sweetheart. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for kindness that wouldn't come. I was preparing to make sure my silence wouldn't be mistaken for surrender. The day I rewrote my will, I felt like I was burying something. Not just the past, but the last flicker of hope that things might still return to how they once were. I met with Carson again, this time in a different office, smaller, quieter. His son had taken over most of the practice, but Carson still handled what he called the serious cases. I guess an old man trying to protect the only thing he had left counted. He laid out the paperwork slowly, with the patience only another widower can understand. "You sure about this?" he asked, pen in hand. "Yes," I said. "I've never been more certain." The terms were simple. The house, the one I built, lived in, and nearly died in, would not go to James. Not after what he allowed to happen. If he or Emma attempted to contest the will, the property would automatically be donated to a local veterans charity Marjorie and I used to support. I asked for that clause specifically. Carson called it the poison pill. "I don't want to destroy him," I said. "I just want him to leave me alone." Carson nodded, understanding more than I could put into words. "Sometimes protecting peace looks like war, Harold." We went over every clause twice. I listed my granddaughter, the only one who still knocked before entering my room, as the contingent executor. Not because I expected her to carry that burden, but because I wanted her to know someone still saw her heart. I signed everything with a hand that trembled, but not from weakness. It was grief, the kind you carry in your bones when you realize your own blood has turned cold. Carson placed everything in a sealed envelope. "Make copies," he said. "Keep one hidden. Give one to someone you trust." I gave one to Pete, the neighbor. Told him everything. Not in a bitter rant, but plainly, like reading a report on someone else's life. He didn't interrupt, didn't judge. Just nodded and said, "If they try anything, you call me." I mean it. When I got home, I passed Emma in the hallway. She was on her phone, laughing at something. She didn't notice the legal envelope tucked under my coat. She didn't see the way my eyes had stopped pleading. James was in the living room, half asleep in front of the television. A baseball game played in the background. Years ago, he would have begged me to join him. Now he didn't even look up when I walked past. I went to the basement and placed the second copy of the will in Marjorie's old sewing box, the one she never let anyone touch. She'd understand. That night, I sat in my recliner, stared at the ceiling, and breathed. The silence that once felt like punishment now felt like armor. The next morning, I started clearing the attic. Not out of spite, but preparation. The house was going to change, one way or another. If they pushed, I'd push back. But this time, I had the law on my side. I boxed up old photo albums, letters, baby shoes. Each memory weighed more than the box it went into. I found a photograph of James as a toddler, sitting on my shoulders at the county fair. His face lit up with pure joy. My eyes were squinting in the sun, smiling the way only a proud father can. I stared at it for a long time. Then I slid it gently into a smaller envelope and tucked it into my sock drawer. Not because I forgave him, but because I wanted to remember that version of him. The one before everything hardened. Later that week, I went out and bought new locks, industrial grade. Pete came by to help install them. We didn't speak much. Just worked in sync like men who know time is short and dignity is worth the effort. That evening, James noticed the new locks. "Why are these different?" "Security," I said, pouring coffee. "Can't be too careful these days." Emma narrowed her eyes. "You didn't tell us." I looked up. "I don't need to." She scoffed. James scratched the back of his neck but said nothing. They knew something had changed. I had drawn a line. Not loudly. Not cruelly. But firmly. In my will, I didn't leave them hate. I left them absence. And sometimes, that's louder than rage. It was the gym equipment that finally broke me. I'd been out that morning, taking a walk through the neighborhood. Same route Marjorie and I used to take every Sunday. I still do it once or twice a week, just to remember what normal felt like. But when I came home that day, the house didn't feel like mine anymore. The guest bedroom, the one with Marjorie's old quilt folded neatly on the edge of the bed, was gone. I walked past it on my way to grab a book and stopped cold. Gone. The bed had been taken apart, moved. The nightstand was in the hallway. The shelves once filled with Marjorie's books were empty. In their place, dumbbells. Resistance bands. A yoga mat. A flat screen bolted to the wall. It wasn't just redecorated. It had been erased. I stood there staring at the space, my book forgotten. The smell of rubber and synthetic air freshener filled the room. Emma came around the corner, holding a smoothie. She looked surprised to see me. "Oh," she said. "We didn't think you'd be home so early." I just stared. She glanced into the room. "We figured it wasn't being used. We needed a place to work out. It's part of our health routine." I opened my mouth, then closed it. Not once had they asked. Not a conversation, not a warning. Just took the room and gutted it. No mention of Marjorie. No thought to the memories. Just convenience. "Where's her quilt?" I asked finally, my voice low. Emma blinked, caught off guard. "The old one? I think I boxed it. Or maybe donated it. It was pretty worn." My legs weakened. I had to grip the doorframe to keep from collapsing. "Donated," I whispered. "Without asking me?" She frowned. "It's just a blanket, Harold. We needed the space. Just a blanket. Marjorie sewed that quilt by hand the winter after James was born. Every square was from a shirt, a dress, a piece of fabric from some moment in our life. She stitched in silence, crying sometimes when she thought I wasn't watching. It was her way of holding on to time. And now it was gone. Emma shrugged, clearly uncomfortable. "It's just stuff." No. It wasn't. I turned and walked down the stairs. My body moved on instinct, but my mind was spiraling. I sat on the basement bed, stared at the wall. My jaw clenched. My chest burned. That was the moment. The one I didn't come back from. I pulled out the envelope with the updated will. Read it again. Ran my fingers over the signature. I wasn't second-guessing myself anymore. I opened my filing cabinet, pulled out the deed, the utility bills, the old mortgage papers, all of them with my name front and center. Then I opened a fresh folder. Labeled it, "Final Step." I called the locksmith. Told him I needed every lock changed. Front, back, side, even the garage. I arranged for it the next morning, during a window I knew they'd be gone, Emma's brunch group and James's gym appointment. I didn't write a letter. I printed one line on a page and left it on the kitchen counter. "If I'm not family enough to be respected, you're not family enough to stay." I changed every lock that day. I packed all of their things into boxes, everything that wasn't nailed down. Pete came over with his truck and helped carry them out to the garage. We labeled each one. No rage. Just efficiency. I left the kids' things untouched. Their drawings still hung on the fridge. I wasn't angry at them. They were just trying to grow up in a house where the adults had forgotten what respect was. That evening, when they pulled into the driveway, James tried his old key first. It didn't work. He tried again, confused, then turned to Emma, who pulled out her copy. Same result. I watched from the window. Emma stepped back, arms crossed. James knocked once. Then again, harder. I opened the door halfway. Didn't invite them in. What is this? Emma demanded. I didn't respond. Just handed James a small manila envelope. Inside was a copy of the deed, the will, and the note. You're locking us out, he said, stunned. Dad, we live here. No, I said. You stayed here. While it suited you. Now it doesn't. Emma scoffed. You can't just, this isn't legal. It is, I said quietly. Everything you need to confirm that is in that envelope. The house is mine. You were guests. Guests who overstayed their welcome. James looked at me like I was someone he didn't recognize. Dad, this is going too far. No, son, I said, voice calm. This is me going home. I shut the door. Didn't slam it. Didn't lock it immediately. Just stood there, waiting. They didn't knock again. They left. That night, the house was quiet. Not heavy, not sad. Just quiet, and mine. They didn't try to come back the next day. Or the day after that. For a week, there was nothing. No calls. No knocks. Not even a text from James, though, given I was still blocked, I suppose that wouldn't have come anyway. Then came the wedding. Not James's, of course. Emma's cousin was getting married, a grand event they'd been planning for months. They had RSVP'd long ago, and from what I'd heard through the neighborhood, they were still planning to attend. And so was I. Not by invitation. By principle. Emma's parents had always seen themselves as the classier ones, real estate and second homes and shrimp cocktail nonsense. They never liked me much. Thought I was too rustic. That was their word. Rustic. But I'd been to enough family events with Marjorie to know how these things went. Lots of speeches, lots of bragging, and lots of pretending everything was perfect. That night, I decided it was time for one thing that wasn't. I showed up in a clean suit, dark gray, pressed, with the tie Marjorie once complimented at our 30th anniversary dinner. I parked on the street, walked up the driveway, and stepped inside the rented banquet hall like I owned it. James saw me first. His eyes widened, then narrowed. Dad, he said, approaching fast. What are you doing here? I came to speak, I said. Not long. Just enough. This isn't the time, he hissed. I smiled gently. That's what you said when I asked for 5 minutes to talk after you found that folder in the garage. You never gave me those minutes. Now I'm taking them. Before he could respond, I stepped past him and into the main room. The microphone stood at the corner of the stage, just beside the wedding planner's clipboard. I didn't rush. I didn't sneak. I walked slowly, intentionally, like I'd done on my wedding day, like I did at Marjorie's funeral, like a man who knows every word he's about to say matters more than every one he didn't. People turned. Heads tilted. Emma's face went pale. I tapped the mic once. It rang out through the speakers. My name is Harold, I began. Some of you know me. Many of you don't. I'm James's father. Emma started to stand. Someone tugged her back down. I wasn't invited here tonight, and I'm not here to make a scene. I just want to say a few things. The truth, mostly, because I've had a lot of lies whispered around me lately, and I think it's time for some fresh air. I looked straight at James. This man, I said, is my son. I raised him in the house I still live in. I taught him to ride a bike, to tie his shoes, to treat people with respect. I thought I'd taught him well. The silence was absolute. But a few months ago, I found out my calls were blocked. My name was erased from documents. My wife's memory, my late wife, was boxed up and tossed aside without a word. My home, the one I invited them into, was slowly being taken out from under me. Gasps now. Small ones. Murmurs. A few uncomfortable shifts. I pulled the folder from my coat. Held it up. This is the deed. This is the will. This is the truth. The house is mine. Always was. I gave everything I had to them, and they tried to erase me for it. I paused, letting it sink in. So, I changed the locks. I took back what was mine. I won't apologize for that. And I won't pretend that blood entitles anyone to kindness without respect. Emma's father stood up. Sir, this is not the... I turned to him. Sit down. He did. I faced the crowd one more time. I wish them no harm. But I will no longer be silent. And if you're wondering whether this kind of thing happens, yes. It does. Right under your roof. Until one day you're locked out of your own life. I stepped down. No applause. No yelling. Just silence. James followed me out into the parking lot. Was that necessary? He asked. I turned. You had 100 chances to talk to me like a man. You chose silence. You don't get to be upset now that I spoke. He shook his head. You embarrassed me. No, I said, opening my car door. You did that to yourself. And I left. Drove home with the windows down. The cool night air on my face. I felt something lift that night. Not pride. Not satisfaction. Relief. They finally knew what I'd been carrying. And I was finally done carrying it alone. Do you think the father made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The morning after the wedding, the house was still. Not just quiet, hollow, like it had exhaled something heavy. No knocks on the door. No phone calls, not even a text from my granddaughter. The silence wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was confirmation. They heard me. Loud and clear. For a moment, I thought I might feel guilty. That maybe I had gone too far, humiliated them too publicly. But as I walked through the kitchen and saw the clean counters, the fridge still stocked the way I liked, the coffee brewed strong, I didn't feel guilt. I felt peace. The town didn't stay quiet, though. People talk, always have. At the bakery, someone nodded at me with a bit more respect than usual. At the post office, the clerk paused, then said, "Saw you speak at that wedding, took guts." I didn't respond. Just offered a polite nod. But I could feel it in the way people looked at me, the narrative was shifting. I wasn't the forgetful old man anymore. I was the one who stood up. Still, the loneliness settled in around the edges. Not sadness, just absence. The kind you feel when you set down a heavy object you've carried for too long. Your arms remember it, even when it's gone. I took longer walks that week. Went to the cemetery twice, once during the day, once just before dusk. Marjorie's stone was clean, the flowers I'd planted last spring blooming late. I sat by her grave and spoke out loud, not because I thought she could hear me, but because I needed to. I did it, Marge. I finally said what needed to be said. You'd be proud. You'd also tell me I waited too long. I smiled to myself, imagining the way she used to scold me gently, like a teacher correcting a beloved student. I don't know what happens now, I told her. But I know this house is safe again. Your roses are still growing. And no one is throwing your quilt away ever again. I stayed until the sun dipped low. Watched the orange light spill over her name carved in stone. On the walk home, I passed the community center. It was buzzing with activity, kids running in and out, a few volunteers hauling crates of supplies. I hadn't noticed it before, or maybe I had and just didn't care. Something tugged at me. Not a calling, just curiosity. The next morning, I stopped by. Asked if they needed any help. The woman at the desk, young but not patronizing, smiled and said, "Always. You know anything about carpentry?" "Not anymore," I said. "But I know enough to be useful." That's how I ended up spending the next few weeks fixing shelves, rewiring an old light fixture, even building a few planter boxes for the back lot. The center was small, underfunded, but full of people who showed up. One day, a little boy asked if I was the janitor. I laughed. "No, son. I'm just the guy who had a hammer when nobody else did." He nodded seriously, like I'd given him sage wisdom. In the evenings, I returned home to quiet, but not emptiness. I'd pick tomatoes from the garden, watch old films, reread letters Marjorie had written me back in the 80s. It felt like I was rediscovering a rhythm that had been buried under the weight of obligation. Then, one afternoon, I saw her. My granddaughter. She was standing at the gate, hesitating. I opened the screen door before she knocked. She smiled shyly. "Hi, Grandpa." "Hi, sweetheart." She looked older, somehow. Not just taller, but thoughtful. "Can I come in?" Of course. We sat on the porch, the same swing where Marjorie and I had spent so many evenings. She stared at her shoes for a long time before speaking. "Mom and Dad said you embarrassed them." I nodded. "I imagine they'd say that. They said you've been acting different. Angry. Do I seem angry to you?" She paused. "No. Just tired." I looked out at the yard. I spent a lot of years being quiet to keep the peace. Turns out, silence can cause more damage than honesty. She was quiet again. "Then, I miss Sunday pancakes. You used to make them like clouds." I chuckled. "Still can. Got the skillet inside." "I miss being here," she said. It felt safe. I swallowed. "It still is. For you." She didn't stay long. Just enough to say what she needed to. Just enough to let me know that not everything was broken. When she left, I stood by the door for a long time, watching the road, not waiting, just breathing. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was in a house full of ghosts. I felt like I was in a home again. It started with the back room. The one Marjorie used to call the sun room, even though the blinds had been stuck for years and the windows fogged up every winter. I hadn't touched it in ages. But one afternoon, I walked in and stood there a while, just breathing in the dust and stale air. The light still found its way in. I looked around at the boxes, the rolled-up rugs, the broken chair leaning against the far wall, and I thought, maybe this could be something again. The idea didn't come in a flash. It came slowly, like water returning after a drought. Bit by bit. That week, I cleared the room out. Boxed up the clutter, pulled back the blinds, opened the windows wide. The sun poured in like it had been waiting. I stood in that light and smiled. At the community center, I started asking more questions, not just about repairs, but about programs. They told me about local veterans who needed temporary housing. About young men and women discharged too early, too injured, too broken to land on their feet. And I thought, I've got space. I've got silence. And I've got time. What if the house became more than just a house? What if it became a place where people could catch their breath? Marjorie had always wanted to open a small bed and breakfast. Nothing fancy, just a warm place with hot meals and clean beds. She had a name picked out and everything, Marjorie's house. I found the little sketch in one of her journals. She'd drawn a signpost, vines curling around the letters. She never got the chance to build it. Maybe I could. I went to the zoning office and asked what it would take to convert part of the home into a boarding space. They gave me a stack of paperwork, smiled politely, told me, "It's not impossible, but it'll take some effort." I said, "Effort I've got." I started making calls. Pete helped me paint. A woman from the community center offered to help with the grant forms. My granddaughter, bless her heart, came over on weekends to help organize closets and set up donation bins. We worked in quiet rhythm, like we all understood this was bigger than us. Every room I cleared out, every nail I drove in, I felt closer to Marjorie. Not in a ghostly way, but in a purposeful way. One afternoon, while reupholstering the old reading chair, I found a letter wedged beneath the cushion, one I'd forgotten. It was from Marjorie, written on the back of a grocery list. "If you ever feel useless, remember the way the house creaks. It's not falling apart. It's just remembering all the years we filled it with life. Don't let it go quiet, Harold. Fill it with something good." I cried for the first time in weeks. Then I got back to work. Word started spreading. One of the local churches offered to donate bedding. A retired nurse volunteered to stop by once a week to help with any residents who needed medication schedules. A high school student asked if he could do his senior project by helping paint murals in the hallway. We weren't even open yet, but the house was already filling again, this time, with people who wanted to be there. I had a new lease written up, simple, month to month, with 3 rooms marked for short-term boarders. We'd prioritize veterans, especially those recently discharged or dealing with PTSD. No one would be turned away for lack of funds, not if we could help it. I contacted the veterans charity Marjorie and I had donated to for years, the same one listed in the poison pill clause of my will. I told them what I was doing. They offered to help with licensing, grants, and referrals. I told them the name I wanted on the sign. They said, "It's perfect." One night, after a long day of sanding floors and scrubbing grout, my granddaughter brought over dinner, chicken pot pie, the way Marjorie used to make it. We sat on the porch again. She looked around and said, "It feels different now." "Good different?" She nodded. "It feels like life. Not just a house waiting for something bad to happen." I smiled. "That's the plan." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "Mom and Dad still don't get it." "They don't have to," I said. "I'm not doing this for them." She was quiet a moment, then whispered, "I think Grandma would be really proud of you." I blinked fast. "I hope so," I said. Inside, the walls smelled of fresh paint and lemon oil. The dining room table was cleared. The kitchen was clean. And soon, someone who needed a soft place to land would find one right here. Not because I wanted to save anyone, but because I knew what it felt like to be forgotten. And I wasn't going to let this house, her house, end in silence. They started arriving one by one. Not in a flood, not with suitcases or speeches, just quiet footsteps through the front gate, tired eyes, hopeful voices. The first was Daniel, a former Marine who'd been sleeping in his truck behind the hardware store. The community center called me about him. Said he just needed somewhere to sleep, somewhere to shower, somewhere to feel human again. I showed him to the second bedroom, the one I'd scrubbed down myself, and said, "No cost. Just respect the house." He looked around, stunned. "You sure?" "Positive." That night, he left a note on the kitchen counter. "Thanks for seeing me. It nearly broke me." Then came Carla, a former nurse who lost her apartment after an injury left her out of work too long. She brought a single suitcase and a small cactus. She offered to cook. Said it made her feel like herself again. Next was Tom, quiet, older, eyes too weary for his age. He didn't speak much at first, but when I caught him fixing the porch railing without being asked, I just nodded. He nodded back. That was enough. The house felt alive again, not in the chaotic way it used to, but in a steady rhythm. The mornings were quiet coffee and soft greetings. Evenings were shared meals, music on an old record player, quiet conversations about nothing and everything. No one argued. No one demanded. And for the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells. They called it Marjorie's house, without me asking. Someone hung a handmade sign over the entryway. The letters were crooked, but beautiful. Pete dropped by often, usually with lumber or groceries or just to sit on the porch and share a beer. He said the place looked better than it had in years. I agreed. We had a small garden out back again, Marjorie's roses tended carefully by Carla, with Daniel building trellises for the tomatoes. Tom kept the tools sharp and the shed organized. Every person added something. It wasn't blood. But it was family. One evening, my granddaughter came by with brownies she'd made from scratch. She stepped inside and paused. I could tell she felt it, the shift. The warmth. The welcome that used to live here. Daniel stood up to greet her. Carla waved from the kitchen. Tom offered her a glass of lemonade. She sat down at the table, looking around slowly. "It's beautiful," she whispered. I nodded. "They respect the house." She looked at me, a little teary-eyed. "I get it now." I put a hand over hers. "You're always welcome here. You and your future. No matter what your parents think." She looked away for a second. "They think you're trying to embarrass them. They still call this whole thing your phase." I smiled. "Let them." She smiled too. "Are you mad at them?" I thought about that for a moment. Really thought. "No," I said slowly. "I'm sad. There's a difference. I'm sad they didn't try to understand. I'm sad they chose convenience over conversation. But I'm not mad. That would mean I still wanted something from them." "And you don't?" I shook my head. "Not anymore. I wanted family. I just didn't realize it could come from strangers who care more than people who share your last name." She stayed for dinner that night. Helped Carla serve the food, helped Tom clear the dishes. Daniel told her a story about basic training that made her laugh until she snorted. I hadn't heard her laugh like that in years. After she left, Daniel leaned back in his chair and said, "You raised a good one." I smiled. She raised herself. I just tried not to mess it up. The next morning, I stood in the hallway and looked at the walls. New photos were going up, snapshots of laughter, garden work, shared meals. I placed a photo of Marjorie and me on the mantel again, next to one of the new residents. It didn't feel like a replacement. It felt like an evolution. Emma and James still hadn't reached out. I hadn't seen them since the wedding. But sometimes, I'd see their car drive slowly past the house. Never stopping. Just watching from a distance. Maybe they were curious. Maybe they were ashamed. Either way, they didn't come in. And I didn't wave. This wasn't a house of revenge. It was a house of restoration. And they made it clear they wanted no part in that. But the people who showed up now, they showed up fully. With open hands and honest intentions. One afternoon, Carla sat beside me on the porch swing and said, "You know, I haven't felt safe in years. Not until I came here." I didn't know what to say. So I just patted her hand. That night, I wrote in my journal, something I hadn't done since Marjorie passed. I wrote. "Maybe family isn't who shares your blood. Maybe it's who sees your worth when you feel invisible." And in Marjorie's house, we saw each other. Clearly. Completely. Without conditions. It had been over 2 months since I'd seen him. James. I wasn't expecting him. Certainly wasn't hoping. I had made peace with the silence, learned to stop checking my phone, stopped glancing toward the road every time I heard a car slow down near the house. So when I opened the front door that morning to find him standing there, hands in his coat pockets, eyes sunken and cautious, I didn't say anything right away. He looked older. Not in the face, in the way he stood. Like someone who'd been carrying guilt too long without saying its name. "Can I come in?" he asked. I studied him. The boy I raised. The man who blocked my number. The son who once told his wife I was a burden. "You can sit on the porch," I said. He nodded, not surprised. He followed me to the swing and sat stiffly on the edge, as if the cushion might bite him. The house behind us was buzzing. Carla was cooking breakfast. Daniel had gone to pick up supplies. My granddaughter was upstairs repainting a hallway wall with quotes. One of them was mine, apparently, "Silence is not peace." We sat in the quiet a while before he spoke. "Emma's living at her mother's place now." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "She didn't take it well," he added. "What you did?" "The locks. The speech. She thinks you humiliated us." I kept my hands folded in my lap. "And what do you think?" I asked. He stared down at the floorboards. "I think you were right. About everything." That surprised me. "I was angry at first," he went on. "Thought you were just being vindictive. But then I started remembering all the times you helped me, and I didn't say thank you. All the sacrifices you made, and how I just expected more." He paused. "I don't know when I started treating you like a problem to solve instead of a person to love." A breeze passed between us, cool but not cold. "I found your wedding photo," he said. "The one that used to be on the mantel. Emma had packed it away. I didn't even notice." "She didn't pack it away," I said. "She buried it." He nodded. "I've been reevaluating things. Looking for somewhere to stay short-term while I get back on my feet. But I didn't come here for that," he added quickly. "I just wanted to say something. That I'm sorry." I believed him. At least, I believed the part of him that finally found the courage to come back. But belief isn't the same as forgetting. "Do you know what it's like," I said quietly, "to walk past your own child and feel like a guest in your own home? To hear your wife's memory referred to as clutter? To be erased while you're still alive?" His eyes filled. He didn't try to stop it. "I do now," he whispered. We sat there for a long time. No more words. Just presence. "I'm not asking to come back," he said finally. "I just wanted to come clean." "That's a start," I replied. "And that's all it is." He nodded. Wiped his eyes. As he stood, he looked toward the windows. "I didn't think you'd actually do it," he said. "Make the house into something new. Something better." I stood too, slower than I used to. "I had help," I said. "Real help." He took that in. Didn't argue. Then, before walking away, he looked me square in the eye and said, "She would have been proud of you." Mom. That stopped me cold. For a second, I saw the boy again, the one who used to sit beside me at the kitchen table and ask questions about the stars. The one who used to hug me goodnight without being asked. "Maybe," I said. "But she wouldn't have been proud of how you treated me." He nodded. "I know. We didn't hug. We didn't make promises. We didn't pretend we could go back." He walked away with quiet steps, hands still in his pockets. And I stood on the porch a while longer, watching the sun rise over the edge of the lawn, knowing something had shifted, not fixed, but faced. Inside, Carla called, "Breakfast is up." I turned. My granddaughter was already setting the table. Daniel brought in a carton of eggs. Tom poured coffee. The house wasn't waiting anymore. It was living. Would you have forgiven him? Let us know in the comments. The ribbon was yellow. Marjorie always liked yellow. I stood at the front porch in a crisp button-down shirt, the same one I wore to her memorial. It felt right to wear it again today, but not in mourning. In celebration. People gathered on the lawn, some neighbors, some from the Veteran Center, a few local officials. Pete was there, holding his camera like a proud uncle. My granddaughter stood beside me, smiling with her whole face. Daniel wore a tie, though it didn't quite match his shirt. Carla had baked muffins. Tom had trimmed the hedges that morning, just to make the place look sharp. And there it was, the new wooden sign hanging above the front door, hand-carved and painted by a group of volunteers. Marjorie's house. Underneath, a place to rest, rebuild, and remember. I took the scissors they handed me, silver and heavy. Everyone quieted. I don't like long speeches, I said. A few soft chuckles. But I've learned something about houses. They remember. Every step you take, every word you speak, the walls hold it. The floorboards carry it. And if you let bitterness fill the cracks, it'll echo louder than you think. I paused. Looked at the front door. This house was once filled with silence. Not peace, silence. The kind that makes you feel like a ghost in your own home. But it doesn't echo anymore. Not like that. I looked out over the small crowd, real people, faces full of gratitude, hope, dignity. This house is no longer waiting for love that won't come. It's giving it. And not because it has to, but because it can. I cut the ribbon. The crowd clapped, quiet and respectful, like the moment didn't need noise to be important. Inside, the house had changed. The walls were painted warm earth tones. The front room, once hollow, now had couches with mismatched cushions, a small bookshelf filled with donated paperbacks, a corkboard with thank you notes pinned in overlapping rows. The dining room table had 6 chairs now, none of them fancy, all of them filled most nights. Upstairs, the rooms were labeled with wooden plaques, peace, hope, and second chances. Carla made those. Said people needed to feel like their room meant something. And in the hallway leading to the back, one new frame held a photo, Marjorie, laughing with a pie in her hand, a little flower on her nose. I don't remember the day we took it. But I remember the way she laughed, full and from the chest, like she wanted everyone to hear joy existed. I talked to her sometimes. Quiet moments at the sink, folding laundry, walking past her roses. Your house is still standing, Marge, I'd whisper. And it's full again. One night, a new boarder arrived, a woman named Tina. Early 30s, bruised soul, quieter than the rest. She barely spoke for days. Then one morning, she left a note on the counter, "This is the first night I've slept through in 2 years." That's when I knew. I didn't need an apology from James. I didn't need my name on a plaque. I just needed to know that something good had grown from what nearly broke me. My granddaughter visits every Sunday now. She bakes, reads with the residents, helps with applications and resumes. She calls Marjorie Grandma like she used to, as if she never stopped. One day she asked if she could hold her college graduation here, just a small gathering in the garden. I said yes before she finished the question. And James? He sends the occasional card now. Small ones. One had a photo of a mountain range on the front and just 2 words inside, "Still learning." That's enough. I don't need him back in the house. But I'm glad he knows where it is. Every evening, I sit on the porch swing Marjorie loved. The one I almost lost to a storage unit. It creaks a little more now, but it still holds my weight. From that seat, I can see the garden blooming, the kitchen windows glowing, the front gate swinging open and closed as people come and go, always someone new, always someone searching for a place to start again. And I whisper, sometimes aloud, sometimes just in my head. You were right, Marjorie. Love doesn't live in silence. It lives in doors that open. In chairs pulled close. In voices that ask, how are you, and wait for the real answer. Your house lives, Marge. And so do I.